And it's 8 p.m. live on eTV. You're welcome to another edition of Fact Sheet Live on eTV. Tonight we are talking about a very, very important subject matter which has to do with our educational system. I know there's been so much talk about our educational system for the past 2 or 3 weeks in the media space. There have been talks about a review of our educational system with emphasis on our free SHS program, which commenced in September of 2017. Some hold the view that after running the system for the past 4 years, there is the need for us to have a conversation about some of the loopholes in the system and how to correct them. In this regard, there have been talks about funding for the free SHS program and how sustainable it is. There have been talks about infrastructure that is lacking with respect to the free SHS, issues about accommodation, issues to do with classroom facilities, which is making us run the double-track system, and concerns that are being raised by parents. Recently, there have been talks about how, as a nation, we need to come together and fashion a way to ensure the free SHS program stays on. With the yearly enrollment increasing year by year, there are concerns about how we are going to fund this project, especially with the revelations that have come through that we have spent over 7 billion so far in funding the free SHS. The hints about how we would have to borrow to fund the free SHS program. These are all matters of concern tonight as we sit down to deliberate on our secondary education. We are also talking about the political angle to the issues about the running of our free SHS program. Are we playing politics with the free SHS program, or we are not? Issues about feeding students who are on campus. Just recently, in May, Charles had to issue a statement calling on the Ministry of Education to release funds for them to run the schools. It became a matter that was discussed in the media space for some time. Weeks after, the ministry told us they had released some 125 million for the schools to run the institutions. There have been talks about how those who have the capacity to pay for their awards to be in the free SHS program should be allowed to pay. There have been talks about how the PTA must be allowed to also contribute to support the various institutions. All these things are issues on our table to discuss tonight. And so, I welcome you to join us with your thoughts, your views, and your comments, even as we deliberate on the free SHS program. Is it about time for a review as to the way forward with the implementation of this program? My name is Samuel Ishen, and I welcome you to the discussion. This program is running live on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is Happy989FM, and then eTVGhana as well. We are taking a short break. When we come back, I will introduce you to my guests who would help me do justice to the issues. Welcome back, still live on eTV. This is Fact Sheet. Here we speak to the facts and nothing but the facts. My name once again is Samuel Ishen, and tonight I have with me in the studio Mr. Daniel Osabote. He's a senior lecturer at the Accra Technical University. He's joining me in the studio for this conversation. We'll also be joined via Zoom by Mr. Peter Anti. He's the Executive Director for iFirst. We'll also be joined by Dr. Clement Apaku, who is a Member of Parliament for Busa South Constituency, and Mr. Kofi Asare, who is the Executive Director for Africa Education Watch. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the conversation. Good evening.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Osabote, I will start with you.
Okay.
And we're looking at the assessment of the free SHS program so far and the course for review. From where you sit, how would you assess the performance of the free SHS 4 years on?
All right. Thank you very much. Let me say good evening to all viewers of eTV. Free SHS, yes. Looking at the performance over the past 3.5 years, I think there have been challenges, even though we all appreciate the fact that it has really helped parents who hitherto couldn't afford the payment of school fees and other facilities. That notwithstanding, I always say that we never bothered to do proper stakeholder consultation in terms of involving major stakeholders. okay? Because if you look at how the policy was even rolled out, MPP campaigned on the free SHS in 2016. So when they assumed power, then we had the opposition party asking them, you told us you were going to implement the free SHS. We've not seen anything. So I saw it to be more of fulfilling a campaign promise vis-a-vis the pressure that was coming from the opposition party. If they had taken their time to have really done proper due diligence, I think some of the problems that we are facing could have been averted. That is how I see it. That notwithstanding, I'll be the first person to say that free SHS has really helped most parents, okay? But I would like to rather look at it not in terms of only access, but we should also look at it in terms of quality, okay? So we shouldn't just be touting ourselves that for the past 4 years we've been able to roll out such a flagship program. That is very good, but are we seeing that commensurating quality in terms of our education?
But do you get a sense, do you get a sense we are sacrificing quality for quantity?
Not sacrificing quality for quantity per se, but it appears we are looking more at enhancing enrollment, okay? Ensuring that more people have access to secondary education. Because if you look at the free SHS policy, it hinges on 3 thematic areas. We are talking about access, you are talking about equality, and then you look at equity. Now, putting all these 3 thematic areas together, we are supposed to have something that will be churned out in the form of better quality, okay? But are we seeing those things?
But if you talk about quality, is the measurement of quality not based on the results that the students, the first batch who went in 2017, the results that they produced at the end of the day?
Yeah.
If the results was good comparative to what we previously, when we were running the progressive system, if it was the same, then how do we judge the standards, whether quality has fallen or not? Yeah,
so I mean, it will be very simplistic to just conclude by looking at the performance of the free SHS students, the first batch, okay? Because a lot of things go into performance. Much will depend on the students, parents, government, district assembly. So when you put all these things together, then you are looking at proper analysis of whether the free SHS has enhanced performance or it has rather deteriorated the performance. Has it led to abysmal performance? So I'm coming. So if you look at it that way, then it will be too simplistic to say that the results alone should be.
So let's not simplify it then. What indices are you looking at when you talk about quality?
Very good. So one, we are looking at availability of classrooms because a lot of things, and you look at the teacher-student ratio, right? You are supposed to have at least 25, but what are we seeing? We have seen the introduction of double entry. I say double entry, sorry, double track, because I'm an accountant. So double track system, right, that has been introduced. And we have lots of parents who have been complaining. As it stands, we don't even know when students are in school and when they're at home. You understand? But this thing could have easily been averted if private secondary institutions have been involved. You know, they started crying that, look, we have what it takes in meeting government halfway. So what prevented us from also involving them? Because if we trust them to give us basic education, primary education, JHS, why can't we put the same trust in the private institutions? You understand? Private schools to also give us secondary education. Now we have lots of private institutions running tertiary programs. Do we believe that they can run tertiary programs? We believe they can run basic education programs, but they cannot run secondary education program. And that is where I'm coming from. That if we had really made use of some of these private institutions, well-equipped private institutions, I don't think there would have been the need for us to even think of going into double track.
All right, so let me speak to Mr. Anti and pick his thoughts so far. 4 years on the implementation of the free SHS program. Mr. Anti, what's your take so far, how we have done as a nation with the implementation of the free SHS program?
Thank you very much. I normally say that you assess a program based on its set objectives. So, professionally, you would want to assess this policy based on the thematic areas that the program is based on. That is access, equity, and then quality. So, you might want to take them one by one. In terms of access, the very moment that you remove that financial burden or barrier from the way, you are automatically increasing enrollment. So if you look at the number of students that are now accessing senior high school, there's been a considerable improvement in enrollment. You check the statistics from the MS data 2017 to 2020, you would see that there has been a considerable improvement in the number of students that have accessed senior high school, who might not have been able to access, although there are issues with enrollment in some of these schools. Then you also look at equity. At first, if you look at even the GPI, the gender parity ratio or index, you will see that it was less than 1. I mean, if you look at the number of males compared to females. Now you see that because most of the times within our cultural setting, you will see that families would want their male child to go to school than the female child. The gender parity ratio was a little bit on the low side when you are looking at it from the perspective of the female child. But now we are having 1.03, which means that they are almost at par, and in some instances you will see that more females are accessing secondary education as compared to males. So that is in terms of equity. In terms of equity, assessing a level of quality senior high schools, I mean the top class senior high schools. Now you see how students are being posted here and there. You would agree with me that we are doing that. We are not doing well with financial equity, and that is one of the biggest challenges we will be talking about going forward. Then you talk about quality. Yes, quality, as the other guests in the studio said, we look at quality from 3 perspectives, and professionally, you know that we have inputs, we have outputs, and then we have outcomes. So input variables of quality. You look at the Ghana Education Service, their input variables. They are talking about student to class ratio, student to classroom ratio, student to desk ratio. You are talking about teacher to student ratio. They are talking about student textbook ratio and all those things. And it is expected that these are supposed to have a certain benchmark that they are supposed to reach. So in terms of the quality input, you would realize that student to textbook ratio has improved. If you study the MS data from 2016 to 2020, you will see a considerable improvement in student to textbook ratio. Although there are issues with elective textbooks, which we can also talk about in terms of the challenges, but there has been a considerable improvement in that sector. Then you look at the student to teacher ratio, which is a big problem, and that even is one of the reasons why we introduced the double track. So without the double track, we would have had a bigger problem at hand, because most of the classes, and we've done a study on this with my senior brother Kofi, which will be publishing very soon. Most of the classes were having 120 students, 130 students to a teacher. Then with the double track came in, and we've been able to reduce the classes, although we will not be able to reach the threshold of 1:25 students, one teacher to 25 students, but we've been able to reduce that. So in terms of the input, you see that we are doing well in some areas, we are not doing well in other areas, and the student to classroom ratio is a big problem, and that boils down to infrastructure. But then you look at the outcome. I mean the output, which is basically the student performance, and we have only one result to look at. And as the guest in the studio said, you cannot pinpoint or you cannot associate the performance of the students in the just ended WASI to 3 years HS, unless for us professionally, you should have done some sort of a scientific study to control so many variables, and then you would note what's really contributed to the performance of the students in the just ended WASI. So that is about the output. But what we are so much concerned with from our perspective is the outcome. How are these students going to contribute to the total development of the country? How are they going to contribute to citizenship? They are going to contribute to their quota as citizens of the country. And that boils down to, what are we teaching them? what is the content that the free SHS is delivering, and if they are they imbibing the content, would it be able to secure them the kind of future that we need? And that is a conversation that we need to have. Fortunately, there seems to be some kind of curriculum reform which is yet to reach the senior high schools, and we are hoping that we'll be able to address this holistically, so that when the students pass through the system, their academic achievement is good, all right, but how do they fit into the broader economy of Ghana and contribute? Because these investments that we are making are supposed to yield a certain kind of outcome, and if we are not able to get that supposed outcome, then it means that the investments that we are, the money that we are pushing into the sector is just going to waste. So we have to look at it from that perspective. So in our analysis, this is how we look at we can assess the free SHS, and maybe when you go ahead, you talk about the challenges, especially the financial issues.
Quickly dash to Mr. Sari and pick your thoughts. The issues about the financial conversation and the funding of the free SHS. Initially, when we started having the conversation about the free SHS, we're asking for how we are going to fund this project. So far, it looks as if we don't have a specific source where it would go to when it comes to the funding of the free SHS. Is the program sustainable financially?
Good evening to my co-panelists and your cherished audience. Before I talk about the financial sustainability, I wanted to add one bit to what my brother Peter said. One important indicator of quality. You see, it is difficult to decouple the free senior high school from the secondary education. And so because the free senior high school project was not developed as a program technically, you realize that at the point when you are measuring its success, it's difficult for you to get clear indicators without referring to the secondary education aspect of the education strategic plan. So free senior high school is situated within Ghana's secondary education response. And so the way we talk about basic education and not FQ, let's talk about secondary education and not necessarily free senior high school. Because free senior high school is only a vehicle, it's only a fuel, but the main vehicle is secondary education. In the education strategic plan, one of the targets is to improve students' performance in STEM, in science, technology, and engineering. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. One of the key targets is that the baseline is that WASI pass rates in science and maths are as low as 49% and 34%. That was in 2016-17 baseline. So if you are looking at quality, you can still look at the WASI pass rates because it is captured in the education strategic plan as one of the indicators of quality under secondary education. Now, what do we see in the past WASI, for instance, if we have to go by? If you take the two subjects it mentioned, science and maths, in mathematics, the pass rate was 65.3 in 2019. And in 2020, it was 65.7. And so there was a marginal increase, virtually was the same 65%, but marginal. In integrated science, the pass rate was 63.17 in 2019, and it reduced to 52.53. It reduced by about 11 percentage points. So these are the two that I will talk about. You realize that if you want to talk about quality, we reduce by 11 percentage points in the area of integrated science. And in mathematics, we made a marginal increment. And so those are some of the indicators that I will look at if I am judging the quality of free senior high school within the context of WASI in science and then in maths. Having said that, yes, there are issues relating to financial sustainability. There are issues related to financial sustainability because we think that how much government is spending, averaging about 2 billion a year.
Sorry, let me just pause you for a second. The point you made about the figures, the integrated science bit. Now, do we know what would have accounted for the decrease by 11%?
No, we haven't done an investigation into what may have accounted for the decrease. Okay, we haven't made an investigation, but obviously it was a very, very, very significant decline compared to the previous year, because you made 65% and 65% in maths. You maintained the performance and improved marginally by a micro point. But in the integrated science, it was about 11 percentage points. We are unable to know. We haven't established any. We haven't done any inquiry into that. But obviously, it tells us that something was wrong, from that angle. Now, what we are saying is that a free senior high school, even though it's very, very good, for it to remain very good every day, it must be in a financial model which is sustainable. No one is saying that a free senior high school is not worthy of financing. But the test of a good policy is among others, its financial efficiency. The government of Ghana can do everything it wants to do, with the exception of turning a man into a woman. It can do everything it wants to do. It can decide to finance free senior high school, yes. But that's not what we are talking about. So it's not about can government finance it. That's not the question. The question is about the efficiency in the use of scarce resources within the education sector, and whether or not the manner we are spending on the free senior high school justifies the opportunity cost. What's the opportunity cost? If you have 15 billion cedis to spend in a year, like we do have this year, and you decide that about 4 billion will go into just secondary education, about 4 billion. The meaning is that you are crowding, and don't forget that secondary education is consumed by only 1.2 million children. The meaning is that you are crowding basic education from getting its 30% share of the budget, because you are taking close to 30% for 1.2 million children, while basic is struggling to get 30% for about 7 million children. So you have to look at the issue of scarce resources, optimum allocation of resources, efficient utilization of scarce resources. That is the lens we need to look at the financial sustainability issue, and not whether Ghana can sustain it or not. Ghana can always do. We can use it. We are using money to finance child training allowance, so you can do anything you want to do with your money. But whether it represents an efficient allocation of resources, whether the opportunity cost. In the past 4 years, how many basic schools have we built? In the past 4 years, hardly 500. In the past 4 years. Meanwhile, as we speak, there are 5,000 primary schools without junior high schools. So when children complete school in Kwekrum, they walk to Nkwantanae 7 miles, in and out 14 miles to access junior high school. That is why between class 6 and junior high school 1, the highest level of dropout is recorded between those two classes. Why is it so? Because we don't have enough resources to provide junior high schools for primary schools or primary schools. So if you don't have enough resources,
this point, talking about prudently, using our funds and efficiently, from the perspective of your organization, how efficiently could we have managed our funds when it comes to allocations towards the free SHS program or the secondary education?
By ensuring that those who have the financial capacity to pay are made to pay. It's as simple as that. We have proposed two suggestions. The first suggestion is that government has achieved a lot when it comes to finance. The digitization of the financial sector. Government has touted its achievement in the area of trying to formalize the informal sector and formalize the financial sector. One of government's main achievements, as captured by government's own documents and as witnessed by all of us, is ensuring that every Ghanaian has a TIN. So you have a TIN, I have a TIN, Peter has a TIN, and Dr. Park has a TIN. If you log onto the database of GRA, you're able to know how much I earn because I have a TIN. If I undertake any work and I'm paid, my TIN is required. That's why we all have TINs. Why is it impossible for government to use our TIN numbers to determine who is earning more than, if you like, 2,000 Ghana cedis a month, for which reason you should have the capacity to pay your fees at senior high school level. Why is that difficult? You understand? And so we have developed a financial system that makes it possible for data on the income levels of Ghanaians to be readily available to government. It is an achievement of government, and we give it to government. In the same way, government should use that achievement to do targeting, so that at least those who earn up to a certain level, who can be identified by their team, should be made to pay 2,000 Ghana cedis a year. That's the free senior high school fees. So it's 2,000 Ghana cedis a year, not a semester, a year. 2,000 Ghana cedis a year.
Let me understand this, because the initial conversation was about voluntary decision to pay. Now you are suggesting using some threshold markers to compulsorily let people pay. How is that going to happen? Little challenge with Mr. Asari's line. Let me go to Dr. Clement Park and pick his thoughts on the position of Mr. Asari, that we should have a conversation about using some categorization, some threshold to begin to let people pay for the fees of the awards if they earn a certain income. The how is my concern. Doc, what's your take on this issue?
Well, first of all, let me say good evening to your good self and to my co-panelists, and to appreciate the depth of the conversation. I believe that I will take it from where Mr. Asari left off. I think you probably have seen an article that I authored, and my article was largely based on the sustainability of the policy. It is very clear that as a nation, we ought to look at alternative ways, more sustainable ways of maintaining the program. But to be able to arrive at that decision, it will require a national stakeholders forum for us to consider all the issues raised by, co-panelists and other stakeholders in the educational space, so that at the end of the day, we can fashion the way forward. Look, I think we all agree that the policy is a good policy. The policy is well intended. But by virtue of how it came into being, as others have indicated, without a lot more work in the background, consulting stakeholders and considering the pros and cons and the potential challenges, some of which, have now come to bear, it has cost us not to get the best from an otherwise good policy. And that is where we speak about the challenges of implementation. And so I would agree that we need to take another look at the program. But as to whether or not what Mr. Asari is proposing is the best option, will be too early to tell. It is one of many options. I argue this way because the program has now become a national program. And therefore, the way forward should be a matter for a broad stakeholder consultation and conversation, so that when we agree that this is the way we think we should go, given what we now know, we can carry the entire nation along.
Stakeholder consultation, what are you looking at? Is it the usual get together to meet and discuss? Are these concerns, problems, challenges not obvious enough for us to deal with?
Well, Sammy, I think that the challenges are obvious. I mean, we all know them off the bat. We can count them. I mean, the double track, overburdened teaching and non-teaching staff, the inadequate space, the poor quality and sometimes inadequate food, and the erratic academic calendar, and what have you. But I've argued in the article that I authored, and I think many would agree, that as the program continues to grow, the student population continues to swell. Yet the challenges that we have identified seem to drag on, and some of them are being compounded because the resources that should be available for us to address them are not forthcoming. And I'm sure you have heard some of us even raise eyebrows about the fact that government has already started borrowing to finance the policy. When indeed many Ghanaians were of the impression that this program was going to be funded from direct revenue coming to the state and not loans. So the issue of funding, I would say, is the mother of all challenges. And that is why we have to look at alternatives, whether we are going to go with the model being proposed by Mr. Asare, which is indeed what pertains in other jurisdictions, because I've lived in the US and Canada, and I know that this is the type of model that they use, what Mr. Asare is proposing based on income. Then those who fall below a certain threshold clearly would have to have the awards benefit because they wouldn't be able to support them by paying their fees. There are others who are also looking at, perhaps as a nation, we look at some type of levy that would be, sustainable, so that every year the resources that would come from that levy would go directly to finance the program. So the alternatives are many. But you see, the point I also want to make is the point that Mr. Asare made. Because this free senior high school was born out of a very hectic political contest from the onset in terms of the approach, where we in the NDC had canvassed the gradualist approach, so to speak, and the current government had canvassed the immediate full-scale implementation. We have tended to forget that other layers of the educational structure do exist. So, for example, the figures that Mr. Asare has mentioned with regards to the number of primary schools the number of basic schools without junior high schools is real. In fact, there are a number of primary schools who don't also have KGs, and that is also a challenge. And if we even come to the tertiary level, the lecturer-student ratio is becoming debilitating. So we have become very fixated on the free senior high school, and all the resources, the bigger chunk of the educational budget is channeled to finance the free senior high school policy to the detriment of the other equally important layers of our educational ladder. And I think that is a source of worry.
Ajima granted an interview where she made the point that it's for the government to admit some of these challenges and concerns so that the NDC can help. In that respect, what help do you have as a political party, especially with you being a member of parliament and being on the education committee of parliament? What alternative do we have in terms of suggestions to cure these challenges we are discussing tonight?
Well, I think that, yes, I think Professor Nana was very candid, and I think that what she has said is being repeated by many players in the education sector. You would agree with me to present a very defensive posture anytime the subject
of the problem. Now
policy,
we are talking about solutions. So Ghanaians are asking if the government fails to, swallow
no,
humble pie.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that.
Yes, okay.
As a member of parliament and a deputy ranking member, one of the avenues we have available to draw attention to issues is through deliberations at the committee, which of course is shared by the majority, or to file questions to the minister. So we are constrained there, because then the chairman can decide to table an issue or not. But as a political party, we have made some proposals, and I know that, you know, one of my colleagues earlier on spoke about it. There is absolutely no reason why government should not include the private senior high schools in the delivery of this policy. We know they are capable. They've done it in the past before the introduction of this policy. They have the facilities, they have the expertise, and the record of their participation in educational delivery is self-evident. So I don't see why government has been very adamant in bringing them on board. That is one practical way of addressing the challenge to do with inadequate space. The other area where...
When it comes to the private schools, because is government going to shoulder the burden of these private schools by taking care of their school fees and all those things as they are taking in the public schools already? We admit the government is burdened and funding has become a challenge.
Look, I remember that the association representing the private schools had made a number of submissions. And as somebody who participated in a working group to draft the manifesto proposal on education for our campaign for 2020, I have been privy to some of their interactions with our flag bearer, John Dramani Mahama. They were willing to open their doors and to take in students at the same rate that government is offering to pay to keep students in the public school system. They have made that very clear. And so it is just government's refusal to bring them on board. But speaking about solutions, one other area that I think government ought to consider, and I believe my colleagues would agree with me, was to reinstate the role of parent-teacher associations in assisting in educational service delivery. This policy of relegating them to the background has not been very beneficial. It has not been helpful. We all know the roles that PTAs have played and the roles that they can play in assisting the state to provide the much needed service of educating the next generation. So that is also another practical thing that government can do. And with these two issues that I've raised, this would not even require the stakeholder consultation that I am talking about. These are matters that government can just give a directive and that would happen. But the stakeholder consultation, in my opinion, would have to consider the bigger issue of funding and its sustainability, and to address some of the much more endemic challenges to do with infrastructure, the recruitment of adequate teachers, and of course, also looking at the food chain in terms of food and other supplies to these institutions.
A question to Mr. Asare and Mr. Osabuta, I'll come to you shortly. Now, Mr. Asare, I want to find out from you, how do you help a government which does not admit that it's facing challenges or problems with the implementation of the free SHS, and therefore, one, may call for a review of the program, and two, a stakeholder consultation?
That is the biggest of our challenges. There's a saying in Akan that Obi Nume Droma Yarefo, which literally means that no one takes medicine for the sick person. So the person says they are not sick. You can't go and buy medicine and then administer the medicines by force. That is the biggest of our challenges. But in this case, it is not just about Obi Nume Droma Yarefo. But it's actually a case of, as we continue to pretend that there's no illness, it affects not only government, but all of us. Because the rippling effects of misallocating resources in the education sector is that you deny certain critical subsectors like basic and TVET of ample investment to the benefit of secondary. Let me give you just one example. You know, prior to 2017, we had free exercise books for basic schools, public basic schools. And we had free uniforms for public basic schools. Somewhere in 2017, when the free senior high school started, we canceled the free exercise books in public basic schools and moved it to senior high schools. Does it make sense? The most important aspect of our educational system, the foundation at the basic level, where poverty is endemic at the community level, we canceled the free exercise books and canceled the free uniforms and moved free uniforms and free exercise books, 9 exercise books, 4 notebooks, shipped it to the secondary level. So whenever resources are misallocated, it comes back and affects the poor person in the community whose child attends a basic school without a uniform, enters the classroom without exercise books. So even though we are heavily constrained because government is saying that there is no illness, there's no need to drink the medicine, we still have to keep encouraging government to appreciate that, look, there is an ailment. And so let's have a discussion about the best medication for the ailment. Other than that, the ailment will come and affect all of us in future. So we keep pushing and hope that one day government will open the door. But again, government will not open the illness if our brothers too in the NDC do not approach the issue in a more nationalistic manner. If it appears that our brothers in the NDC are interested in finding faults and making capital out of the faults and simply saying, I told you so, I told you so, the government will never concede that it is sick. And that is one of the reasons why government actually has gross inhibitions in accepting genuine calls for review, because it's afraid of the political, of the political case that may go in favor of the NDC and against it. And so our brothers in the NDC should also tone down the political angles and then situate their submissions in a more nationalistic manner, so that government will depart from its own inhibitions and accept that a review is possible, and the review may help or will help the strengthening of the achievements of the free senior high school program's objectives.
Zabute, let me take a comment from you as to what fate awaits us if the opposition political party, the major one, the NDC, hounds the government when it comes to the free SHS program. And the government is also adamant to open itself up for a conversation about review and how to nationally correct the challenges in the system. What fate awaits us?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sami. With this critique, I believe, as Mr. Asare rightly mentioned, we need to look at it from that nationalistic point of view. I don't think when it comes to secondary education, we have NDC, we have MPP children, okay? We have Ghanaians. We have Ghanaian children who be attending secondary school. So I believe that in identifying some of these challenges, we should be bold enough and put aside our political coloration and rather approach the issue trying to see how best we can help in solving it. It shouldn't be like somebody will be making capital out of, be making huge points out of the challenges. I told you so, concept shouldn't come in. If we continue to back out, try to hit government trying to tell government you have failed. We told you are not going to succeed. Then government to continue to be adamant in opening up for the review. But I believe that in going forward, we are doing almost 4 years. It is about time we get back to look at the review. I mean, we should be able to evaluate the performance of this policy and ask ourselves, are we okay with where we are currently? And the answer is no. There is more room for improvement. And some of the suggestions that have come up, I think that we need to consider some of these things. One, when it comes to the problems, it boils down to finance. Sammy, it is all about finance, because we are talking about infrastructural gaps, deficits, they are there. It is finance. You are talking about employing qualified teachers, adequate teachers, it is finance. So it boils down to finance. That is why sustainability has become very important. Now, as a nation, how do we sustain this policy? Because it's a good policy, and we cannot sustain it if we don't have any regular way of funding it. We have a sustainable funding system.
So let me pose the question then. If we have to borrow to fund the free SHS program, would you say that is prudent?
It is not prudent.
Okay.
It is not prudent because we should be able to even rely on domestic tax in financing the free SHS. Initially they were using the annual budget funding amount in funding the free SHS. But then in 2019, government decided not to, because of the volatility when it comes to the oil and then gas revenue. And, people raised that concern, and government heeded to that concern. So now we are not using it. Now the question is, how do we continue to finance free SHS if we cannot identify a specific sustainable source?
All right. Let me go for a quick break, and when I come back, just under 1 minute, a question I'll throw to all my guests this evening. One, would you be willing to pay if government said pay? Number two, can we borrow to fund the project? We'll be right back. All right, so you're welcome back to the conversation. This is Fact Sheet Live on eTV. So I told my viewers that for the next 8 minutes or so before the show ends, 2 questions, and I would beg my guests to help me to try and answer the question within a minute for me so we can end the conversation well. Dr. Parker, I start with you. Would you be willing to pay for your ward's education if the government asked you to? And number 2, would you agree if we were to borrow to fund the free SHS? Under a minute, sir.
Well, I thought you would have allowed me to talk a bit on the political angle, but well, we will move on since you have not granted me that permission. Yes, if it were to be the case that I had to pay for my ward to go to secondary school, I'll be willing to do it. The second question, no. I don't think that it is sustainable for us as a nation to continue to borrow. Because what that would do is that eventually the same wards that we are educating will be saddled with huge amounts of debt to pay. So we need to look at a more sustainable way of financing the program without having to borrow to keep it going.
Santi, are you willing to pay? And is borrowing the option that's available to us?
Yes, of course. If I am supposed to pay for the education of my ward, I would definitely do that. I'm paying the fees of my children in their basic school. So why shouldn't I pay for that? And that shouldn't be a problem. But you don't borrow to finance your education when you know that you are throwing a lot of money away, and there are ways by which you'll be able to finance your the education in the system. So I'm not for borrowing money to finance. There's a lot of waste in the system. I think my other panelists alluded to all these things, and therefore, why should we borrow? We should be able to strategically position the free SHS in such a way that it will live beyond political parties, it will live beyond generations. And the only way we can do that is to fix the sustainability issue. And that would not rely on borrowing. It will rely on a robust financial mechanism that should be built by us.
I will tweak your question a little bit and ask, after tasting free education, do you think Ghanaians will be willing to pay for free SHS, and would they subscribe to borrowing to pay for the same system?
I think yes, of course, Ghanaians should. Ghanaians who have the ability to pay for their children's school fees will be ready to pay for free senior high school. Specifically, Ghanaians earning more than a net income of 2,000 Ghana cedis a month should be in the capacity and should be willing to pay 2,000 cedis a year as free senior high school fees. And I will gladly, I will refuse to have the state pay for the fees of my child, because I know I have the capacity to pay. And I shouldn't deny or deprive others who do not have the capacity by misallocating resources, against them. I don't have any case against borrowing to finance education, provided that the available resources are being efficiently utilized, not when the available resources are being utilized in a wasteful manner.
For Mr. Sabute, do you think, let me tweak your question as well, do you think Ghanaians will be willing to pay after tasting the free SHS, whether they have the capacity to earn 2,000 Ghana cedis, net salary? Do you think after tasting free, they'll be willing to pay?
Yes, I mean, I believe that if you look at one of the thematic areas that has to do with equality, why should a day student be enjoying free SHS while we also have a border also enjoying free SHS? Meanwhile, there is no equality there, because if you have a ward who is a day student, every day he or she pays for transportation, 1 square meal, just once a day, taking food in the school. Now, what about those in the boarding house? They take 3 times. Yeah, okay, so if you are talking about equality, there it is defeated. Okay, so I believe that depending on how we send the message, if we allow people to understand that, look, it has gotten to a point where we are spending so much on the borders, for which parents should pay for the boarding facilities. So if you have a ward who is in a boarding house, you should be prepared to pay. Okay, so I believe that we should rather look at free day schools, not just the boarding facilities also being added to it. We need to take the boarding the borders out and not rather extend it to only the day students. With that, I know people will buy into that concept and be willing to pay. So, Sammy, you have a ward who is in the boarding house. Won't you pay for it? I have a ward in the boarding house, pay for the boarding facilities. But if it's a day student, then we should all enjoy the free facility. Okay.
I'm grateful, Mr. Sabute, for your final submission. I love your idea, that you shared with us. But time is not our friend. I'd like to thank my guest, Dr. Clement Apak, who is a member of Parliament for Busa South and member of the Education Committee of Parliament. I'd like to thank Mr. Daniel Osabute, who is a senior lecturer at the Accra Technical University, Mr. Peter Anti, who is the Executive Director for IFEST, and Mr. Kofi Asari, who is the Executive Director for Africa Education Watch. Gentlemen, I'm grateful you made time to join me tonight. Girl Vibes is up next, and there will be a repeat broadcast of the show tomorrow live on eTV at exactly 10 a.m. My name is Sambole Chen. Stay with us.